move on to this. I've been talking about the types of legislation that have been coming through Parliament in recent months. And, of course, I'm making the point here, you can't look at any individual piece of legislation as a singular thing and not be concerned about what else is going on in the country. I want to add another piece of legislation to this list now, and it has been getting a little bit of media coverage over the last couple of days, and that's the energy bill. Now, just to give an idea of what this is, let's just read the preamble to the text of this. It says, it's a bill to make provision about energy production and security and the regulation of the energy market, including provision about the licensing of carbon dioxide transport and storage, about commercial arrangements for industrial carbon capture and storage and for hydrogen production, about new technology, including low carbon heat schemes and hydrogen grid trials, about the independent system operator and planner, about gas and electricity industry codes, about heat networks, about energy smart appliances and load control, about the energy performance of premises, about the resilience of the core fuel sector, about offshore energy production, including environmental protection, licensing and decommissioning, about the civil nuclear sector, including the Civil Nuclear Constabulary, and for connected purposes. And what we seem to see increasingly with bills that are going through the UK Parliament is they're extremely broad in scope. And this is something that we seem to be grabbing from the United States and making bills covering a whole range of areas. And of course, under those circumstances, stuff gets snuck in that perhaps wouldn't normally be noticed. So if we just put that back on screen for a second, about the energy of performance of premises, that's what the focus of this is about. And I just want to bring part 10 of the bill on screen here. Energy performance of premises. The Secretary of State may make regulations for any of these purposes. So first of all, may make regulations. This is about what happens in the future. So the bill doesn't actually say what the Secretary of State's going to do. Through secondary legislation, that's statutory instruments, he's going to do stuff in the future. And those purposes might be enabling or requiring the energy usage or energy efficiency of premises to be assessed, certified, and publicized, enabling or requiring possible improvements in the energy usage or energy efficiency of premises to be identified and recommended, and C, restricting or prohibiting the marketing and disposal of premises on the basis of whether their energy usage or energy efficiency has been assessed, certified, or publicized. Now, this is exactly what's been going on in France. I'll show you this in a second, but basically what this means is you cannot rent or sell your house if you don't have a particular level of energy certification in your house. So if your house is older and you don't have suitable, can't think of the word. Anyway, we'll move on. And new rules for selling house in France. As I say, this is what's been going on in France already. So if you don't have the correct energy certification for your home in France, there are restrictions on how you can sell your house. They're talking about bringing that into the UK as well. But here's where it gets even more insidious, because there's a segment in the bill on sanctions. The enforcement provision that may be made includes provision for a person with public functions to enforce a requirement imposed by or under energy performance regulations, about the sanctions for non-compliance with a requirement imposed by or under energy performance regulations, about the sanctions for the provision of false information in connection with such a requirement, or about the sanctions for the obstruction of or impersonation of an enforcement authority or a person acting for an enforcement authority. So what are they talking about here? What kind of sanctions are they actually talking about? Well, what they're saying is that energy performance regulations may provide for the imposition of civil penalties by enforcement authorities in relation to cases falling within B, C, and D in the slide we just showed you. But the regulations may not provide for a civil penalty that exceeds £15,000. So you could be in receipt of a £15,000 fine if you don't conform with what the government is demanding. And of course, we don't know what the government's demanding because that all comes in secondary legislation later on. And the second part of this is with reference to criminal sanctions. So energy performance regulations may provide for the creation of criminal offences in relation to subsection 1B, C, or D. But the regulations may not provide for a criminal offence to be punishable with imprisonment for a term exceeding 12 months. So it could be up to 12-month imprisonment. But here's the thing. For a criminal offence to be punishable with a fine of more than, not for a fine of not more than level 5 on the standard scale. So, okay, that implies that there's some kind of restriction on the level of the fine if it's a criminal fine. But when we actually look at the Sentencing Council and look at the limitations on fines, actually a level 5 fine is unlimited. So this could be up to a 12-month prison sentence and an unlimited fine if you don't conform with the government's requirements for energy certification for your property, or if they deem it necessary for you to make adjustments to your property. Insulation was the word I was looking for earlier. Sorry, I couldn't find that word in my head today. But David, this is quite an incredible situation. Now, the government's absolutely denying that they're going to create new criminal offences here, but it's clear, it's black and white. And if they're not going to create criminal offences, they need to drop this subsection from the bill.
Indeed they do. And up here in the testing ground, as we like to call it, the Scottish Government are already considering making house sales require an energy performance certificate level C, which means no gas boiler for you. You have to fit a heat pump at a very large cost and very inefficient outcome in order to sell your house at all. That's what they're considering. Obviously, there's a lot of pushback against it because it's a crazy idea, but it doesn't always stop them.
No, it doesn't, and it hasn't stopped them in France, and it clearly isn't going to stop them in the UK either. Now,